The psychology of people who never ask for help. You handle it yourself. Always have. When something breaks, you fix it. When something hurts, you push through it. When life gets heavy, you carry it quietly, alone, in the dark, without telling a single person how much weight you're actually holding. And if someone asks if you're okay, you say yes. Not because you're lying, because somewhere along the way you stopped knowing how to say anything else. People look at you and see someone capable, independent, strong. They say things like, "You always figure it out," and "I don't know how you do it." And you smile like it's a compliment. But late at night, when it's just you and the silence, you know the truth. You're not strong. You're just trained. You were trained so early, so thoroughly, that you can't even find the part of you that knows how to reach out anymore. This is the psychology of people who never ask for help. And the answer isn't what most people think.
The obvious explanation is pride, stubbornness, ego, the idea that asking for help feels like admitting weakness, and you can't stand the thought of being seen as weak. But that's not quite right, and the real answer goes deeper than any of that. Because here's what's strange. Studies show that people who never ask for help are often the first to drop everything for someone else. They'll drive across town at midnight for a friend in crisis. They'll spend hours helping a stranger untangle a problem. They'll give advice, time, energy, resources without hesitation, without keeping score. They're not selfish. They're not cold. They're not incapable of connection. They just can't flip the direction. They can give endlessly. They cannot receive. And that asymmetry isn't random. It's a blueprint, one that was drawn long before you were old enough to choose it.
In psychology, there's a concept called the attachment system. It's the internal model your brain builds in early childhood to answer one fundamental question. When I need something, will someone come? If the answer is consistently yes, your brain learns that dependency is safe, that needing people is normal, that reaching out leads to being caught. But if the answer is no, or sometimes, or only if you're not too much, your brain learns something different. It learns that need is dangerous, that asking is risk, that the safest thing you can do is never need anything from anyone. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment, and it doesn't develop because something catastrophic happened to you. It develops in the ordinary, accumulated weight of 1,000 small moments. The parent who was physically present but emotionally unavailable, who answered your questions but never your feelings, who kept you fed and clothed and safe but flinched when you cried, who said things like, "You're fine," before you'd even finished explaining why you weren't. The home where needs were met materially but not emotionally, where you learned that the practical version of you was welcome but the vulnerable version was inconvenient. The childhood where you figured out, without anyone telling you directly, that the way to be loved was to be easy, to be low maintenance, to handle your own problems so quietly that no one ever had to be burdened by you. You became the easy one, the self-sufficient one, the one the adults didn't have to worry about, and you were praised for it, which made it worse.
Here's what the praise did. It taught you that your independence was a virtue, that handling everything alone was admirable, that being the person who never needed anything was something to be proud of. So you kept doing it. You got better at it. You refined it into an identity. By adolescence, it wasn't even a conscious choice anymore. When something went wrong, your first instinct wasn't to reach out. It was to solve. When you were hurting, your first move wasn't to tell someone. It was to contain it, process it alone, package it into something manageable so it would stop taking up space. And it worked. At least, it looked like it worked. You moved through the world appearing competent and together, while quietly drowning in things you never told anyone about. The anxiety you've carried for years that you've described to no one. The grief that never fully processed because you never let anyone sit with you in it. The decisions you made alone that you wish just once you could have talked through with someone who actually knew what was happening. You became fluent in a language with no word for help.
But there's a layer beneath the attachment patterns that most people never talk about, and it's not psychological, it's almost evolutionary. Researcher Brené Brown spent years studying vulnerability and shame. What she found across thousands of interviews was a consistent pattern in people who couldn't ask for help. It wasn't that they lacked the words, it was that asking felt at a cellular level like exposure.
like putting the most fragile part of yourself into someone else's hands and having no guarantee they wouldn't drop it. For people who learned early that their needs were inconvenient, that vulnerability led to disappointment or dismissal, the act of asking for help doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It triggers something older and deeper, a threat response, a full-body no. Because the last time you needed something, it didn't go the way it was supposed to. Maybe you asked and they minimized. Maybe you reached out and they weren't there. Maybe you were honest about struggling and the response was so inadequate that it left you feeling worse for having tried, more alone than if you'd said nothing at all. Your nervous system remembered that, filed it under asking leads to pain. And every time since, when you've come close to reaching out, that memory fires before your mouth can open. You don't decide not to ask for help. Your body decides for you. Before the thought is even fully formed, the door is already closed.
There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with this, one that's hard to describe to people who haven't felt it. It's not the tiredness of doing too much, it's the tiredness of being the only one who knows how much you're doing. Because when you never ask for help, you carry everything in complete silence. Every problem, every fear, every weight. And the silence itself becomes its own kind of burden. There's no one to debrief with at the end of a hard day. No one who knows the full version of what you're going through. No one who can look at you with actual understanding, because you've never given anyone enough information to understand. Showing people only the capable version, the together version, the version that's handling it, that even the people closest to you don't fully know you. And somewhere under all that competence, you're lonelier than anyone around you realizes. The cruelest part is that the very mechanism designed to protect you from disappointment is the thing creating the isolation you're drowning in.
People who never ask for help have a complicated relationship with control, not because they're perfectionists, but because control was the only tool they were ever given. When you were small and the adults weren't consistent, controlling yourself became the one variable you could manage. You couldn't control whether they showed up, whether they understood, whether your needs would be met, but you could control how much you needed. You could shrink your requirements, simplify your asks, eventually eliminate them entirely. Control wasn't a personality trait, it was an adaptation, a way of reducing how much of you was available to be disappointed. And it worked then. It kept you safe. The problem is, you're not there anymore. But the mechanism didn't get the update. It's still running the old software in a world that no longer requires it. Here's what the research shows. A 2008 Stanford study found that people dramatically underestimate how willing others are to help. Participants guessed 3 times more rejections than actually occurred. We think people will say no. They say yes far more often than we expect. And when humans receive genuine support, the brain releases oxytocin, the same bonding hormone released during physical touch and deep trust. Being truly helped is neurologically almost identical to being loved. Every time you refuse to ask, you're not just solving the problem alone. You're cutting yourself off from one of the primary ways human beings bond with each other. You were built for this. Your nervous system was designed to both give and receive. The giving feels safe because you learned to make it safe. The receiving never got that chance.
There's something else nobody talks about. The identity crisis that comes when you can't ask for help. Over years, the self-sufficiency stops being a behavior and becomes a self-concept. You don't just do everything alone, you are someone who does everything alone. And asking for help doesn't just feel vulnerable, it feels like a threat to who you are. If you ask for help, you're no longer the capable one, no longer the person who handles it, no longer the identity you've spent years constructing. Asking for help means admitting the story was never completely true, that behind the competence was someone who needed things, someone who struggled, someone who was never actually fine. So you keep carrying it. You keep appearing whole while quietly fragmenting. Because the alternative isn't just asking for help. The alternative is becoming someone you don't recognize. But here's what that story cost you. The relationships that never deepened because you never let anyone in. The friendships that felt hollow because showing up isn't the same as being seen. The partners you gave everything except the parts that were struggling. You gave people the version of you that needed nothing. They loved that version, and you resented them for not loving the rest. But they never got to meet the rest. The wall wasn't just keeping people from hurting you, it was keeping them from knowing you.
So what does it look like to start dismantling it?
Not all at once, not dramatically. It starts with noticing the moment before the door closes. The fraction of a second when you're about to say, "I'm fine," and you catch yourself, knowing it isn't true. Just noticing it, not even changing it yet. It starts with asking for something small, a favor that costs you something to ask, and watching what happens. Letting it be data instead of confirmation of the worst thing you believe about needing people. It starts with recognizing that the strength you've been performing isn't strength at all. Real strength isn't the absence of need. It's the courage to have needs in a world that taught you having them was dangerous. You were never broken for needing things. You were never weak for struggling. You were never too much for having a hard time. You were just a person who learned in a place and a time that required it, that the safest way to survive was to need nothing from anyone. That learning kept you intact when being intact required it. But you're not there anymore. The version of you that learned not to ask was doing the best possible thing with what they had. You don't owe that version of yourself a lifetime of silence. People who never ask for help aren't strong. They're survivors of a time when strength meant silence. And surviving was enough then. But you were built for more than surviving. You were built for the terrifying, necessary, profoundly human act of letting someone in. Even now. Even after everything. Especially after everything.